My name is Maddie Whitaker, and I'm 41 years old. In divorce court on the 12th of December, my husband leaned into his attorney's ear, then straightened up and looked at the judge and said clearly, "Your Honor, my wife is a freeloader who has never earned a cent." His mistress sat 2 rows behind him. She tilted her head the way a cat looks at a bird it's already decided to eat, and she smirked. I did not argue. I turned my hand over on the wooden armrest of the courtroom bench and let it rest there, empty, the way my grandmother used to rest hers on the arm of her porch swing when she was about to say something no one in the room could take back. Then my attorney slid one bank record across the table to the judge, and the judge frowned. Let me go back to a porch in Franklin, Tennessee in the summer of 1996, because you cannot understand a woman's silence if you do not know who taught her how to keep it. I was 12. My grandmother, Adeline Bellamy, was 62. We were sitting on our white porch swing behind the farmhouse in Williamson County. The paint had bubbled and cracked where her thumb had rested for 34 years. There was a pond past the fence line, and past the pond, a hayfield, and past the hayfield, another fence and another field. All of it, she told me, was ours. She said it exactly once. "Sweetheart, you see that fence line out past the pond?" she said. "That's yours one day, but you don't say that at school. You don't say it at church. Quiet money keeps quiet company." Then she went back to drinking coffee out of a cup with a hairline crack down the pheasant on its side, and she did not mention the fence again for 2 summers. Later that same afternoon, she took my birth certificate off the kitchen shelf and laid it on the porch table between us. She had a blue fountain pen in her hand and a look on her face that made my mother, Rosalind, stop halfway through the screen door and go back inside without a word. "That B," Adeline said, tapping the middle initial, "stands for something. But we don't tell them what." I asked her. Of course I asked her. She pulled a silver pin shaped like a magnolia blossom out of the pocket of her house dress and set it on the certificate. "Bellamy," she said. "Your mama named you Maddie. I named you B. That's the part they don't get. They can call you anything else, but B is mine." She pinned the magnolia to the collar of my sundress. "One day a man will ask you what the B stands for," she said. "If he asks you kindly, you tell him. If he never asks, you keep it." I nodded the way 12-year-olds nod at instructions they know they will one day either be grateful for or destroyed by. I did not know which one it would be. Neither did she. By the time I turned 19, I understood that my grandmother had never once told a lie about money. She had simply refused to answer questions no one had the right to ask. I went to Belmont University in Nashville and studied accounting the way some girls study poetry, because it was a language I already knew, and I wanted to hear it spoken back to me by strangers. At my graduation in the spring of 2005, Adeline stood at the back of the auditorium in the same gray wool coat she had owned since 1974, holding her cashier's check for my final tuition. She had never used a credit card. She had never needed one. By the time I met Griffin Whitaker in the fall of 2010, my grandmother had already been teaching me the same sentence for 18 years. I did not know yet that she was teaching me how to survive him. I met him at a Vanderbilt fundraiser in April of 2010. I was 26. I had gone with a colleague from Hollingsworth and Partners, the small CPA firm where I worked 3 days a week and read novels on the 4th. Griffin was 32 and just about to open his own practice on West End. He was standing near the Raw bar in a Tom Ford suit that fit him well, holding a whiskey he had not yet finished after 20 minutes of holding it. He came over to me because I was wearing a navy dress and no jewelry, and I was the only woman at the fundraiser not looking at him. "You look like someone who's never had to worry about money," he said. "That's a rare face." I remember thinking later that he had said the word money under 30 seconds after learning my name. My grandmother had a rule about that. I remembered the rule. I did not follow it. We dated for 2 years while he built his practice, and I quietly built the systems that let him run it. I set up his accounting because he asked, and because I was good at it, and because I had not yet learned that a gift you give in silence becomes, in some men's mouths, a thing they never received. His mother, Corinne Whitaker, invited me to their house in Belle Mead South for Sunday dinner in the fall of 2011. Griffin walked me through the door and said, "Mom, Maddie doesn't come from much, which is why she gets it." Corinne smiled without her eyes and handed me a bowl of green beans. I called my grandmother that night from the passenger seat of Griffin's Audi while he was inside paying the check. Adeline only asked one question. "Does he ask?" she said. I said, "No." She said, "Good girl." I did not know then that she was telling me to run. We signed a prenup in June of 2012 at the offices of Hollingsworth and Partners. The senior partner, Hollingsworth, had known my father and my grandfather and had drafted the trust language himself in 1998. He looked at Griffin the way an old horse looks at a new gate. "Ma'am," he said to me quietly while Griffin was signing, "this prenup preserves everything from Bellamy. Are you certain you want to keep it out of the conversation?" "Yes," I said. Griffin signed the prenup without reading it. He signed only the last line. I signed every page. 2 weeks later, on the 22nd of June, we were married at First Presbyterian Nashville. I changed my name on the certificate in front of the minister because Griffin said, "We're one now, baby. What's mine is ours." He kissed my forehead. He was smiling. He believed it. He believed the second half of it especially. A week after the wedding, a card arrived at our apartment on West End addressed to Mrs. Maddie Whitaker in my grandmother's handwriting. Inside was a piece of cream cardstock and one sentence, written in the same blue ink she had used on my birth certificate 16 years earlier. "A name is a room you walk into. Make sure you can walk out." I read it 3 times standing in the mailroom. I did not understand it. I put it in the top drawer of my dressing table and I kept it there for 13 years. I unfolded it and refolded it maybe once a year when I was cleaning, and I never once let Griffin see it. He was not a man who read other people's mail. He was a man who did not know other people got mail. I signed my name Whitaker for the first time on the marriage certificate. I did not understand the sentence for 14 years. I understood it on the 12th of December. In August of 2015, we bought the house at 4109 Chickering Lane in Belle Mead for $2.9 million. 3 weeks before closing, I called Regions Wealth and asked them to move $1.6 million from the Bellamy Family Trust Distribution account into our joint checking. The associate said, "Yes, Ms. Whitaker," and then paused and said, "Or would you prefer this be handled as separate property, ma'am? The deed can be titled either way." I said, "Joint." He'd notice if it wasn't. Griffin stood at the closing table in a blazer and signed his side of the deed, one-handed while checking his phone. He did not read the source of funds line. He did not read anything except the sale price and the address. He handed the keys to me in the parking lot afterward and said, "See, honey, this is what I mean when I say hard work pays off. I built this." Ainsley was born 2 summers earlier, in the spring of 2013. I left Hollingsworth and Partners in the same week because Griffin said he needed me at home, and because Ainsley was small, and because I had gotten tired of explaining at parties what a CPA does. His narrative began in that year, and it never stopped. She's home with the baby. It's what she wanted, what she needed. He said it to junior associates. He said it to insurance brokers. He said it to a plumber once in the driveway while I was standing 4 feet away. Ainsley slept in a walnut cradle my grandmother had bought for my mother in 1962. I wrote in a notebook the day we brought her home, year 1 of not correcting him. In the spring of 2019, Griffin expanded Whitaker Aesthetic Surgery, a new wing on the West End building, a second procedure suite, a fresh coat of Belle Meade beige on the reception walls. The construction ran to $780,000. The trust covered every dollar. He posted a photograph of the ribbon cutting on his Instagram on September 12th of that year. The caption read, "20 years of grind. New wing today. Built brick by brick. Nobody gave me a dime. Hashtag Whitaker Aesthetic. Hashtag self-made." It got 8,400 likes. His mother liked it first. I did not like it. That night, after Griffin fell asleep in front of a Predators game, I opened my notebook and wrote a new line, year 7 of not correcting him. I underlined it. Then I closed the notebook and put it back in the dressing table drawer next to the card. In the summer of 2022, we bought a second home in Rosemary Beach, Florida, along 30th. The trust covered the entire $1.1 million. Griffin called it his beach house from the moment we signed. He called it that in front of his father, Everett, at a 4th of July barbecue that same year. "Dad, come see my beach house next month. Maddie's staying home. She doesn't like the sand." I liked the sand. My grandmother had taught me to swim off Gulf shores when I was 10. I had a scar on my left heel from a broken shell she had pulled out with a pocket knife on the seawall while I bit down on the collar of my swimsuit. I did not tell him about the scar. He had never noticed it. There was no reason to start. 14 years of marriage. 40 times a year on average, that a check or a wire authorization or a bank statement passed under his eyes with the middle initial B stamped or printed or signed at the top. 560 chances to ask. He never asked once. Not what the B stood for, not where the money came from, not why the memo line on so many transfers said the word Bellamy. I kept the copies. I bundled them by year with the same yellow twine my grandmother had used for kitchen letters and old ration slips from the war. By December of 2024, there were 168 of them. Every time he said, "I built this," I heard my grandmother's voice. Let him keep the room. The name on the deed doesn't decide who owns the walls. I stopped correcting him in year 3. By year 14, I had almost forgotten I was allowed to. Iniind. My father told me about his sister Elowen for the first time when I was 12, on the porch behind my grandmother's kitchen while Adeline was inside making iced tea. He told me the story 3 times over the course of my life. The first time on that porch, the second time at my rehearsal dinner, the third time in a hospital bed. Elowen Williams had married a man named Corbin Wexford in 1993 and had lost 80% of her share of the Williams family holdings to him in a Franklin divorce court in the summer of 1998. She had not lost because she was weak. She had lost because she had trusted her name to a man who put his on everything. "She's still alive, Maddie B," my father said. "But she doesn't come to Sunday dinner anymore. She doesn't come anywhere anymore, and she never will." He looked at me the way men look at daughters when they are about to teach them the one lesson their own sister could not learn. "Never twice, Maddie B. You understand me?" I nodded. I was 12. I did not understand. I would not understand for 30 years. My father, Judson Williams, was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in June of 2019. Stage 4, 5 months, the oncologist said, being generous. He asked me to sit with him in his room at Vanderbilt on a Tuesday afternoon in September, and he waited until the nurse left, and then he said, "Griffin's a big man now, honey. Bell Mead House. New wing at the practice. He talks a lot about I. Does he ever say we?" I did not answer. He watched me not answer for a long time. Then he smiled the tired smile of a man who has been hoping for a different answer since 1998 and has never received one from any of the women he loves. "Well," he said, "you've got time yet." I held his hand. It was thin and rough. There was a small white scar between his thumb and his forefinger from a wiring job he had done in Franklin in the year I was born. He died on the 18th of November, 2019 at 4:52 in the afternoon. I was holding his right hand and my mother-in-law's Christmas card was on the tray table because Corinne had forgotten to sign her name and I was going to remind her. 2 hours before he stopped breathing, he opened his eyes and looked at me and he said, very clearly, 3 words that he had chosen the way a man chooses a hymn for his own funeral. "Maddie B, never twice." He held my hand tighter for a moment. He said, "You hear me?" I said, "I hear you, Daddy." He closed his eyes. He did not open them again. I sat with him for 2 hours and 40 minutes after he stopped breathing, because I had promised him something without saying it out loud. Griffin arrived at the hospital 40 minutes after the nurses had come and gone. He said, "Traffic on 65, he wouldn't have known." I said, "He would have known." We buried my father at Franklin First Baptist on the 22nd of November, and Griffin stood in the receiving line and shook the hand of every deacon and told the minister, "Reverend, the hospital was a lot. I made sure Judson had the best. The hospital had been a lot, $87,000 a lot. I had paid it out of the trust distribution 6 weeks before my father was even admitted, the moment the oncologist called with the diagnosis, and I understood that we were going to run out of everything except time. Griffin had not contributed $1 to my father's final 6 months. He had not asked. He had not offered. But he stood in a black suit at Franklin First Baptist and told a Presbyterian minister that he had made sure my daddy had the best, and I did not correct him. I never told Griffin the second half of what my father said that night. I never told him the sentence was addressed to Maddie B., the middle initial he had signed on hundreds of checks and never once asked about. Sloan Ashford was hired as PR director for Whitaker Aesthetic Surgery on the 12th of August, 2024. I saw the offer letter 3 days later, folded in half on the breakfast counter under Griffin's coffee cup. He had used the good letterhead, the cream-colored kind we had ordered from a Franklin stationer for our wedding announcements. and he had written the last line by hand in his blue Mont Blanc ink. Hospitality allowance, $2,800 per month, discretionary. Sloan was 28. Her LinkedIn said she had been a brand consultant at a Botox studio in Green Hills for 11 months. Her salary at Whitaker Aesthetic was $135,000 with a signing bonus and a monthly stipend that no one else on staff had ever received. I did not ask about her. I did not need to. I poured a fresh cup of coffee. Ainsley came in for cereal. I opened the laptop on the counter and typed the address for Regions Bank into the browser. It was the first time in 12 years of marriage I had checked the joint account without a specific purchase in mind. The practice had a Halloween party at the office on the 31st of October, 2024. Ainsley was upstairs at a school event. I went alone because Griffin said, "Come on, honey, show your face. It looks weird if you don't." Sloan arrived in a costume Marilyn Monroe would have found excessive. Griffin was not in costume. He was in a suit. They stood together by the front desk for 12 minutes without moving. She came over to me at the punch bowl at 8:44. "You must be so proud of him, Mrs. Whitaker," she said. And she said it the way a girl says something she has practiced. "He talks about the practice like it's his baby." She was holding her champagne glass in her left hand. On her left ring finger, she was wearing a cocktail ring, an emerald in a rose gold setting, that Griffin had shown me on his phone 6 weeks earlier and asked me to help pick out. He had said it was for a client's wife who had come in for a consultation. I said, "Isn't it, though? He's very good at ownership." Sloan did not understand. Griffin looked away. I refilled my glass. Starting the 3rd of November, 2024, I logged into Regions Bank online every Sunday morning at 7:15. I made coffee. I opened the laptop. I copied 3 lines from the transaction history into a blue cloth notebook I had bought at Parnassus Books 6 years earlier. I closed the laptop. I made breakfast for Ainsley. I did not save screenshots. I did not use my phone. I did not send anything to my email. My grandmother had never used a copier in her life. She had used her memory. I used a notebook. The notebook lived under the false bottom of my dressing table drawer, the one I had built when I was 15 out of a piece of walnut my grandfather, Fletcher Williams, had cut for me on a Saturday afternoon in Franklin. On Sunday the 8th of September, I wrote 3 lines. The last one read, "New recurring transfer, $16,800 per month, apartment downtown Tennessee. Started September 1st. I looked up 505 Church Street on the Davidson County Property Assessor's website Monday morning while Ainsley was in school. The building was called the Prescott. 21 stories, glass facade, ground floor coffee shop, valet parking, penthouse level. On the 12th of September at 10:22 in the morning, Griffin forwarded an email to himself and accidentally typed my address into the CC line because our contacts had auto-populated. The email was from the leasing office of the Prescott. The subject read, "Welcome to your new home." The body read, "Dr. Whitaker. Welcome to the Prescott. Ms. Ashford's key fob has been programmed. Please advise on parking preference. Rent draft for October will process on the 1st. I closed the email. I did not delete it. I forwarded it once to a Gmail account I had opened in 2019 under the name m.b.williams1984 and had never used for anything else. Then I emptied my sent folder. Then I closed the laptop. Griffin had signed the lease in his own name. He always signed everything in his own name. I made an appointment with Hollis Kellerman on the 19th of September, 2025. His office was on Bedford Avenue in Green Hills, the second floor of a walnut-paneled building above an old shoe repair. He had been practicing high-net-worth divorce law in Middle Tennessee for 26 years. My accountant had given me his name 3 years earlier, and I had kept it in my phone under the letter H, filed after hardware store and before Home Depot. I brought a leather portfolio containing the 168 bank statements, the notebook, the trust deed, and a copy of the 2012 prenup. I did not bring Griffin's name. Hollis was 58, wearing a gray sweater and no tie, and he made his own coffee in a French press on a side table. He shook my hand and gestured to the chair, and then he said, before he sat down himself, "Mrs. Whitaker, before we start, what would you like to be called in this office?" I thought about it for 4 seconds. It felt like 4 minutes. I said, "Ms. Williams, please." He took my portfolio and he read it for 40 minutes without speaking. I sat in the leather chair across from him, and I counted the ticks of his wall clock the way my grandmother had taught me to count when I was a nervous child on a plane. 2,400 ticks. I did not fidget. I did not check my phone. I watched his eyes. At the 38-minute mark, he took off his reading glasses and set them on the desk very carefully, the way a man sets down a piece of evidence he does not want to touch. He looked at me and he said, "Ma'am, do you understand your husband has committed prospective perjury by omission in every social filing he's made about your household income? Do you understand that a 14-year pattern of documented transfers, once he denies them under oath, becomes something that cannot be undone?" I said, "Yes, sir, that's why I'm here." He picked up a yellow legal pad and he wrote 3 lines with a black felt pen. 1, he files. 2, he testifies. 3, Exhibit A. "Ma'am," he said, under Tennessee Code, Annotated Section 36-4-121, the Bellamy Family Trust, established in March of 2011 with a properly executed spendthrift clause, is your separate property. It was your separate property before the marriage, during the marriage, and it remains your separate property today. Your 2012 prenup confirms this in writing. You had no legal duty to disclose its existence to your husband. Any claim of concealment he might attempt will fail as a matter of law." He tapped the pad. "He'll file. Men like Dr. Whitaker file when they feel exposed. He'll file thinking speed is a shield. It isn't. The court will hear him first, and then it will hear us." I wrote a cashier's check for the retainer while he watched. I signed it Maddie B. Williams. It was the first signature under that name I had made in 13 years. He walked me to the door. He did not offer his hand. He stood beside me for a moment in the small reception area with the smell of ground coffee behind us and the sound of Green Hills traffic in front. And he said one thing that I have thought about every single day since. "Ma'am, when we do this, do not raise your voice. Not once. The paper will do the shouting." I nodded. He said, "I mean it, Ms. Williams. Not at his mother, not at his mistress, not at him, not at the judge, not at your daughter, not at your reflection in the courthouse hallway. Not once. The paper will do it for you, and the paper will do it better." I walked out into the morning sun and drove down West End past Griffin's practice on my way home. His car was in the reserve spot at the front of the parking garage. A silver Audi with the vanity plate WHITAK. I did not slow down. I did not look up at his window on the third floor. I drove home and I did not turn on the radio. The paper would do the shouting. The invitation to the Nashville Symphony Ball arrived at 4109 Chickering Lane on the 22nd of September. The envelope was cream, sealed with red wax embossed with the Vanderbilt Foundation crest. Griffin opened it at breakfast on the morning of the 23rd with a butter knife and read it aloud. "Physician Philanthropist of the Year," he said, and then he said it a second time. Maddie. Hear that? Philanthropist. Ainsley, 12 years old, ate her oatmeal and asked, without looking up from her cereal, "What's a philanthropist?" Griffin said, "Someone who gives back, sweetheart. Like Daddy." I picked up my coffee cup and walked to the sink, and I read the second half of the invitation over the rim. It read, "For his $500,000 gift to the Vanderbilt Children's Cardiac Wing." I did not say anything. I rinsed my cup. I set it upside down on the dish rack the way my grandmother had set hers on her porch every morning for 56 years. I opened Regions Wealth on the laptop later that morning. The trust distribution for the year had processed on the 30th of July, 2025. $500,000 moved from the trust to the joint checking account. Memo line reading annual distribution. On the 14th of August, a second transfer had moved the same amount from the joint account to the Vanderbilt Foundation. Memo line reading in Griffin's own hand. Gift from Dr. and Mrs. Griffin Whitaker. He had taken my grandmother's money, sent it to a hospital wing that already existed because of my grandmother's money, and put his name on it. Then he had called himself a philanthropist to a 12-year-old at breakfast. I called Hollis at 9:07. He said, "Attend. Don't stop him. Let the paper trail add one more line." I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Wear something you can walk out of." Dr. Warren Blackwood had been the director of the Vanderbilt Foundation since 2016. He was 62 years old, and he had, since 2019, personally signed every letter of acknowledgement that went from the foundation to Regions Wealth in care of the Bellamy Family Trust. He had never met me. He had never asked to. The trust was anonymous by request, and anonymity in Nashville philanthropy was a thing men in Blackwood's position honored without needing to be reminded. The letters were 3 paragraphs long. They said the same thing every year, more or less. To the trustees of the Bellamy Family Trust, on behalf of Vanderbilt Children's Cardiac Wing, we thank you for your continued and confidential support. Your gift this year will fund the following. And then a list, and then his signature, in the same dark blue ink my grandmother had once used on a birth certificate in the summer of 1996. He did not know who I was when he saw the guest list for the Symphony Ball on the 30th of September, and he did not connect the name Whitaker to the Bellamy Family Trust when he sat down to write his opening remarks. He would not connect it until 8:42, the night of the 4th of October, when he looked down from the podium at table 12 and saw a silver magnolia pin on my shoulder. Griffin took the invitation into his study on the 23rd of September and pinned it to the corkboard above his desk. The corkboard already held 3 press clippings, a Nashville scene profile from 2019, a Southern Living photograph from 2022 of him and Ainsley on the porch of the Rosemary Beach House, and a business section item from the Tennessean announcing the practice expansion. He pinned the invitation in the center. Underneath it, in his blue Mont Blanc ink, in his own hand, he wrote a single word and he underlined it twice. Finally. I saw the word 2 hours later when I walked past the study to put fresh towels in the guest bathroom. The door was open. Griffin was downstairs on a call. The corkboard was lit by his green banker's lamp. I stood in the doorway for a long time, and I looked at that word. It was the only honest thing he had written in years. I went upstairs and I opened the top drawer of my dressing table, and I read my grandmother's card for the first time in a long time. A name is a room you walk into. Make sure you can walk out. I closed the drawer. On the evening of the 4th of October, I stood in front of the mirror in the master bathroom on Chickering Lane, and I fastened the black dress I had last worn on the 7th of May, 2018, at my grandmother's funeral in Franklin. It still fit. It fit almost too well. I opened the walnut box on the vanity, the box she had given me on my 16th birthday, empty and unlined, and I took out the silver magnolia pin. I had not worn it in 3 years. Ainsley walked in without knocking, in stocking feet, holding a hairbrush. "Mom, is that Grandma Adeline's pin?" I fastened it to the shoulder of the dress, and I looked at my daughter in the mirror. "It's mine, sweetheart. It's always been mine." Griffin knocked on the bedroom door without opening it. "Car's here. Try to smile tonight, would you?" I said, "I will." Schermerhorn Symphony Center holds 1,844 people. The ballroom was full by 7:20. Griffin's table was table 12, second row from the stage. Ivory linen and silver service and a printed menu tucked into a folded napkin at each seat. Sloane Ashford's table was table 14, one row back under a placard that read, Whitaker Aesthetic PR. Griffin sat between his father Everett and a hospital board member from HCA and did not speak to me for the first 15 minutes. Then he leaned over and he whispered, without turning his head, "Dell's over at 14. Try not to make it weird." I looked at Sloane once. She was wearing a cream suit that fit her well and a smile that had not yet arrived. She lifted her champagne flute an inch off the table in my direction. I did not respond. I picked up my own glass and I turned it slowly against the tablecloth so the stem left a small, perfect circle on the linen. Then I looked at the stage. Dr. Warren Blackwood walked out onto the stage at 8:42. He was tall and stooped, with the kind of silver hair that only exists at Vanderbilt fundraisers, and he was carrying a single sheet of paper folded once in his left hand. The lights softened. The room went quiet the way a room goes quiet when it knows what it came for. He unfolded the paper. He said, "Good evening. Thank you all for coming out on this beautiful October night for a cause that has quietly, and I do mean quietly, been changing children's lives in Middle Tennessee for many years now." He looked down at the paper. He said, "Tonight we honor a physician who has given generously to our children's cardiac wing, a donation that continues a long tradition of quiet giving from this community." He looked up. His eyes traveled once across the front row, and they stopped at table 12, and they lowered to the shoulder of the woman sitting to the right of Dr. Griffin Whitaker. He saw the silver magnolia pin. He did not say anything for 3 seconds. He looked back down at his paper. He folded it once. He set it on the podium. He said, when he began again, "I would like to acknowledge, before we proceed with tonight's award, something that I think honors the spirit of this room better than anything else I have prepared. The Vanderbilt Children's Cardiac Wing has been sustained since the fall of 2019 by an anonymous trust whose sole beneficiary is present in this room tonight. I have never had the honor of thanking her by name. I hope one day that she will let me. Tonight, we honor Dr. Griffin Whitaker for tonight's gift. The room applauded in a slow, slightly confused wave. Griffin stood up in the applause. He looked at me for a half second. His mouth opened once, then closed. He whispered, "What is he talking about?" I said, "I don't know, honey." I did not look at him when I said it. I was looking at Sloane. She was looking at Blackwood, and Blackwood was looking very briefly at me. Griffin walked up to the stage and shook Blackwood's hand and took the trophy, and he stepped to the microphone. He talked for 90 seconds. He used the word I 22 times. He used the word we 0 times. I've spent my career giving back. I built this practice. I built this community. I built this gift. I am grateful. I am humbled. I am honored. I want to thank my parents. I want to thank my team. I did not get here without hard work. I did not get here by accident. I did this. I counted with my thumbnail against the pad of my index finger, the way Adeline had taught me to count when I was 7 years old and afraid of a thunderstorm on the porch. He said the word I 22 times in 90 seconds. He did not say the word we once. I counted. My grandmother had taught me how to count. We left Schermerhorn at 9:57. The driver pulled the Mercedes onto 4th Avenue. Griffin sat in the front seat with his tie loose. I sat in the back. He did not speak for 8 minutes. His phone buzzed 4 times in that 8 minutes. He did not answer it. At the light at West End, he turned around and he looked at me, and he said in the voice he used for angry patience, "What the hell was Blackwood on about? Do you know some anonymous rich guy? Are you having an affair, Matty?" I looked at him. I looked at him for a long time, longer than I had looked at him in 6 months. I said, "I'm going to bed, Griffin." He said, "Answer me." I said, "I'm going to bed, Griffin." He turned around and he faced the windshield. He did not speak again on the drive home. His phone buzzed twice more. He did not answer it. The garage door closed behind us at 10:18. Griffin filed a complaint for divorce on the 11th of October, 2025 at 4:12 in the afternoon in the Circuit Court of Davidson County. His attorney was Rutherford Cade, a Belle Meade litigator who had been Hollis Kellerman's opposing counsel in 3 prior matters and had lost all 3. The complaint listed grounds of irreconcilable differences. It also, in a paragraph Rutherford Cade would come to regret drafting, listed a secondary count. Respondent Maddie B. Williams Whitaker has, throughout the marriage, concealed the existence and nature of a family trust from petitioner, thereby demonstrating a pattern of financial concealment materially affecting petitioner's decisions regarding marital investment. Griffin signed it with his Mont Blanc pen at 3:48. Cade filed it 40 minutes later. Hollis read the complaint at 7:04 the next morning, standing in his kitchen in Green Hills with a cup of coffee in his hand. He called me at 7:06. He said, "Ma'am, this is the sentence that will end him in court. He's just built our case for us." I was standing at the kitchen sink at 4109 Chickering Lane. Ainsley was upstairs. I said, "Thank you, Hollis." He said, "Don't thank me yet." Sloane Ashford's Instagram went private on the 13th of October. Her stories from the symphony ball disappeared. She unfollowed Griffin. She unfollowed Whitaker Aesthetic Surgery. She unfollowed a dermatologist in Belle Meade she had been tagged with 3 months earlier. Griffin called me from his car at 6:22 on the evening of the 14th. "Maddie, did you say something to Dell? She's not answering me. She's not at the office. Did you say something to her?" I said, "I haven't spoken to Miss Ashford Griffin." There was a pause on the line. He had never heard me call her that. He had never heard me call her anything. He said, "Maddie." I said, "I haven't spoken to her, Griffin. I'm going to hang up now. Ainsley has homework." I ended the call. I did not block him. I did not need to. On the 18th of October, Griffin took 2 suits to the dry cleaner on Harding Pike. He had forgotten a receipt in the inside pocket of the second one, the navy brioni he had worn to a partner dinner the week before. The dry cleaner mailed the receipt back to 4109 Chickering Lane in a plain white envelope with the shop's return address on it. It arrived on the 21st, a Monday. I was at home. Ainsley was at school. I brought the mail in from the porch, and I stood at the kitchen counter and I opened the envelope. Inside was a piece of thin white paper, folded once. I unfolded it. The Prescott Downtown, Unit 21A, monthly rent, $16,800. Memo, October. Thank you, Dr. Whitaker. I did not read it a second time. I did not need to. I walked upstairs to the dressing table and I opened the top drawer. I lifted the false bottom. I laid the receipt on top of the stack of 168 wire authorizations. I lowered the false bottom. I closed the drawer. There were 169 pieces of paper in the drawer. I sat down on the edge of the bed and I looked at my grandmother's card for the second time in 3 weeks. A name is a room you walk into. Make sure you can walk out. I put it back. I did not cry. Griffin sat for his first deposition on the 6th of November, 2025, at Rutherford Cade's office on 8th Avenue South. Hollis had sent Cade a discovery request 3 weeks earlier that had asked for a full list of household expenditures during the marriage. Cade had responded with a 2-page letter calling the request outside the scope of a straightforward petition. Hollis had smiled at that letter for a long time. At the deposition, Hollis sat across from Griffin with a legal pad and a black felt pen and one leather portfolio, closed at his elbow. He did not touch the portfolio. He asked 40 minutes of questions. Griffin answered them under oath. At the 12-minute mark, Hollis said, "Dr. Whitaker, to your knowledge, has your wife made any financial contribution to the marital home at 4109 Chickering Lane?" Griffin said, "No. I bought that house. I paid for that house. She's not contributed a cent." He said it 4 times over the course of the deposition, in different forms, each time under oath. Hollis wrote down the exact language each time. When the deposition ended, Hollis leaned toward me in the parking garage and he said very quietly, "He just said it 4 times, under oath. We only need 1. The second deposition took place on the 20th of November at the same office. Griffin was less confident. His tie was loose before he sat down. He had lost weight in his face. Hollis asked him about the source of funds for the 30A Florida property purchased in July of 2022. Griffin said, "My earnings from Whitaker Aesthetic Surgery, solely." Hollis wrote it down without looking up. Then he asked about the practice expansion in September of 2019. Griffin said, Same. My earnings, solely. Then he asked about the down payment on Chickering Lane in August of 2015. Griffin said, Same. My earnings, solely. Rutherford Cade shifted in his chair at the second answer. He shifted again at the third. He did not stop the deposition. Later, he would say he had trusted his client to know his own finances. Later, that would sound like the last professional sentence a man says before he stops being taken seriously in Middle Tennessee civil practice. On the evening of the 25th of November, Ainsley came into the kitchen while I was slicing an apple for her. She sat down at the island in the same spot she always sat, feet swinging, elbows on the granite, watching me the way she had watched me since she was 3. She said, Mom, is Dad going to be okay? I did not stop slicing the apple. I did not look up. I said, He will be, sweetheart. He just doesn't know yet. She said, Doesn't know what? I set the knife down. I put both hands flat on the granite, the way my grandmother used to put both hands flat on her porch swing before she said something no one in the room could take back. I said, That he's the one who's been hurting himself, honey. For a long time. That's why. She thought about that. She was 12. She'd spent 7 years watching her father say the word I 22 times before he ever said the word we once. She picked up a slice of apple. She said, Okay, Mom. She walked out of the kitchen. I stood at the counter for 20 seconds without moving. Hollis handed me a manila folder on the 11th of December, 2025, in the small conference room of his office in Green Hills. It was thin. It weighed less than a magazine. He handed it to me across the walnut table with both hands, the way you hand someone a communion wafer or a thing you cannot afford to drop. He said, Bring this tomorrow. Do not open it in the car. Do not open it in the courthouse hallway. Do not open it at all. Just carry it. When I ask for it, you slide it across. I said, Yes, sir. He said, Ms. Williams, do not raise your voice tomorrow. Not once. I said, I know. He walked me to the door. He said, Take the folder home. Put it somewhere your daughter will not find it. Sleep. I drove home. I put the folder inside my grandmother's navy blue knit bag, the one she had made me by hand in the winter of 1994, the one I had used to carry my textbooks to Belmont and my daughter to her first day of kindergarten. I set the bag on the chair by the front door. I did not open the folder. Inside it was 14 years. Courtroom 6C of the Davidson County Circuit Court opened at 9:45 on the morning of the 12th of December, 2025. Judge Nathaniel Sinclair took the bench at 10:14. He was 68 years old, gray-haired with horn-rimmed glasses and the kind of quiet that judges develop after 20 years of listening to marriages end. Griffin sat at the petitioner's table beside Rutherford Cade. He was wearing a charcoal suit and a burgundy tie. He did not look at me when I walked in. He did not look at me when I sat down. Hollis Kellerman sat beside me. I placed my grandmother's navy knit bag on my lap. The manila folder was inside it. I did not open the bag. Sloane Ashford sat in the gallery 3 rows back, in the same cream suit she had worn to the symphony ball. She was wearing the emerald cocktail ring on her left ring finger. Judge Sinclair gavelled the hearing open. Rutherford Cade stood. Your Honor, petitioner will now testify. Griffin took the oath. He sat down in the witness box. He crossed his legs. Cade asked him about the marriage. Griffin talked for 11 minutes about how hard he had worked. He talked about medical school. He talked about the practice. He talked about the beach house. He talked about the expansion. He used the word I 19 times in 11 minutes. I counted. Then Cade said, "Doctor, in your view, what is your wife's financial contribution to the marital estate?" Griffin leaned forward slightly. He looked at the judge. He said it the way he had said it at Sunday dinners for 14 years. The way a man quotes a fact. "Your Honor, my wife is a freeloader who has never earned a cent." Sloane Ashford, 3 rows back, tilted her head and smirked when Griffin said the word cent. Judge Sinclair's eyes moved to the gallery for exactly 1 second. Then they moved back. Hollis Kellerman stood up. He said, "Your Honor, may I approach?" Judge Sinclair said, "You may, counsel." Hollis took 4 steps from our table to the bench. He held one manila folder. He opened it. He took out 1 sheet of paper. He set it on the bench in front of the judge. Then he turned so his voice carried to the gallery. He said, "Your Honor, this is Exhibit A. It is a 14-year summary of transfers from the Bellamy Family Trust, established March of 2011, into the joint checking account of Griffin Whitaker and Maddie B. Williams Whitaker at Regions Bank, Nashville. Total deposits from the trust across the marriage, $4,218,000. 168 individual transfers. Every property titled in Dr. Whitaker's name. The residence at 4109 Chickering Lane. The practice expansion at Whitaker Aesthetic Surgery. The second home at Rosemary Beach. And the penthouse currently leased to Ms. Ashford at 505 Church Street was funded in whole or in majority from these deposits. Judge Sinclair looked down at the paper. He read. He frowned. He read for 22 seconds. He turned the page over. There was nothing on the back. He turned it face up again. He looked at Griffin. He said, "Dr. Whitaker, do you wish to amend the statement you made under oath 30 seconds ago?" Griffin said, "Your Honor, I need a moment with counsel." Judge Sinclair said, "You may have 5 minutes. But be advised, Doctor, Rule 3.03 of the Tennessee Rules of Professional Conduct applies to you here as well as to Mr. Kellerman. What you say in the next 5 minutes will matter." Griffin stood up. His knees were unsteady. Cade stood up with him. They walked out of the courtroom together through the side door. In the gallery, Sloane Ashford stood up. She did not wait for Griffin. She did not look at him. She walked out of the main door of the courtroom in her cream suit and her cocktail ring, and the heavy oak door closed behind her with the small, definitive sound of a woman who has just canceled the rest of her plans for the year. Griffin came back into the courtroom 4 minutes and 40 seconds later. His tie was looser. His jacket was unbuttoned. Cade was walking behind him, and Cade did not look up from the floor. Griffin sat down. He did not sit down at the witness box. He sat down at the petitioner's table beside Cade. Judge Sinclair let it pass. Griffin turned around. He looked at me for the first time in 11 weeks. He whispered, without a microphone, so quietly that only I could hear it. "Maddie, the bee, is that?" I did not answer. I turned my left hand palm down on the wooden armrest of the courtroom bench, and I laid it flat against the grain, the way my grandmother had laid hers on the arm of a porch swing in the summer of 1996. Griffin looked at my hand. He looked at my face. He did not ask a second time. Judge Sinclair said, "Counsel, please proceed." Hollis said, "Your Honor, My client requests one thing this court can grant her today before we proceed to the settlement conference. Judge Sinclair said, "And what is that, Mr. Kellerman?" Hollis said, "The restoration of her name." Judge Sinclair looked at me. He looked at me for a long time. Then he looked down at his order sheet and he wrote something in his own hand. He stamped it. He said, "Granted, Ms. Williams. Restoration of maiden name granted per Tennessee Code. Annotated Section 36-4-110. The court will now take a brief recess." He gavelled. Griffin sat at the petitioner's table with his tie loose. He did not look at me again. Cade did not look at anyone. I stood up. I picked up my grandmother's navy knit bag from my lap. I walked out of courtroom 6C. On the 15th of December at 2:12 in the afternoon, Vanderbilt University Medical Center issued a short press release on its website. It was 3 paragraphs. It was signed by the executive director of the Vanderbilt Foundation. Vanderbilt University Medical Center wishes to correct the record regarding the $500,000 gift acknowledged at the October 4th Nashville Symphony Ball as the Physician Philanthropist of the Year contribution from Dr. Griffin Whitaker. The gift was, in fact, funded by an anonymous trust whose ongoing support of the Children's Cardiac Wing dates to the fall of 2019. At the trustee's request, the identity of the beneficiary remains confidential. Vanderbilt regrets any confusion caused by the misattribution. Griffin read it in his office at Whitaker Aesthetic Surgery at 2:28 that afternoon. He printed it and he tore the printout in half. His office manager saw him do it. She did not say anything. She went back to her desk. By 4 o'clock, 3 other people in Belle Meade had heard about the tearing. On the 17th of December, the Tennessee Board of Medical Examiners received a formal complaint filed by an anonymous party. The complaint identified Dr. Griffin R. Whitaker of Nashville and alleged financial misrepresentation regarding public philanthropic contributions in violation of Rule 0880-02-.14 regarding professional honesty. The complaint did not come from me. I never learned who filed it. Hollis said it did not matter. He said, "Ma'am, when a man builds a reputation on a lie big enough, one of the people who watched him build it will send a letter. That is not something you have to arrange." The board opened an investigation. It did not threaten Griffin's license to practice. It required him to sit for an ethics review and to pay a $12,000 administrative fee. He paid it out of his personal credit card, not the joint account. There was nothing left in the joint account by then anyway. Corinne Whitaker called me at 4:14 in the afternoon on the 20th of December. She had never called me from her own phone. In 13 years of marriage, every conversation between us had begun with Griffin's voice handing me the receiver or with Corinne standing at her own front door with a serving dish in her hands. I recognized her number. I let it ring 3 times. Then I answered. She said, "Maddie." She said it the way a woman says a name she has practiced. She said, "Maddie, I called you dear for 12 years. I never asked you your middle name. I am sorry." I did not answer at first. I stood at the window over the kitchen sink at 4109 Chickering Lane, and I watched a cardinal land on the boxwood. I said, "Thank you, Corinne. Take care of Everett." I hung up. I did not feel angry. I did not feel forgiving. I felt very quietly awake. On the evening of the 21st, Ainsley came into the kitchen while I was reading a settlement draft at the island. She had a math textbook in one hand and a pencil behind her ear. She said, "Mom, are we going back to being Williams?" I set down the settlement draft. I said, "I am, sweetheart. You decide when you're 18. She thought about that. She said, "Grandma Adeline was a Bellamy, though, right?" I said, "Right." She said, "Can I be a Bellamy too?" I looked at my daughter. She was 12. She was standing in the same kitchen in the same spot at the island where she had asked me if her father was going to be okay 4 weeks earlier. She had her grandmother's straight shoulders and her great-grandmother's careful hands. I said, "You already are, honey." She said, "Okay, Mom." She went upstairs to do her homework. I sat at the island for a long time, and I did not cry. The final settlement was executed on the 22nd of December, 2025, at Hollis Kellerman's office in Green Hills. The Bellamy Family Trust remained mine in full. Griffin retained the marital residence at 4109 Chickering Lane, subject to refinance of the $1.4 million mortgage in his individual name within 90 days. The Rosemary Beach property was to be sold, proceeds split equally. The penthouse lease at 505 Church Street was terminated as of December 31, 2025, per the dissipation ruling. I signed one final signature, Whitaker. Then I signed the first signature, Maddie B. Williams, I had made on a legal document in 13 years, 6 months, and 11 days. The W was crooked. I did not correct it. On the morning of the 26th of December, I drove out to Franklin with Ainsley in the passenger seat of the Volvo, and I opened up my grandmother's farmhouse for the first time since the previous August. The gravel driveway was frozen. The porch swing was still there. The paint had bubbled and cracked in the same places. The pond was still past the fence line, and past the pond the hayfield, and past the hayfield another fence and another field, all of it still ours. Ainsley built a fire in the kitchen stove because Adeline had taught her how the summer she was 10. I brought 2 coffee cups down from the cabinet. One was the cup with the cracked pheasant. My grandmother had set it upside down on the counter in April of 2018, and no one had turned it right side up since. I turned it right side up. I filled it. I sat on the porch swing with Ainsley beside me at 10:24 in the morning. The sun was low over the pond. My breath made small white shapes in the December air. I had the cream cardstock in the pocket of my coat, folded once, the ink from my grandmother's fountain pen still legible after 13 years. I took it out. I unfolded it. I read it aloud for the first time in my life. A name is a room you walk into. Make sure you can walk out. Ainsley did not say anything. She leaned against my shoulder. She was 12. Her hair smelled like the same lavender shampoo I had bought her when she was 6. Somewhere past the fence line, a cardinal called, and another one answered. I refolded the card. I put it back in my coat pocket. I did not need to read it again. I had understood it now for 2 weeks. I would understand it for the rest of my life. My name is Maddie B. Williams, and I'm 41 years old. My grandmother, Adeline Bellamy, taught me that quiet money keeps quiet company. She did not tell me the other half, that a quiet woman does not owe anyone the sound of her voice, and that the person who spends 14 years learning to keep silence in a marriage is also the person best equipped to keep silence in a courtroom. My grandfather, Fletcher Williams, built a bench under the magnolia tree behind the farmhouse in 1974 out of a piece of walnut he had cured himself. It is still there. I sat on it once, at 19, and I understood for the first time that the men who build things without needing to sign them are the men who own them the longest. My daughter, Ainsley, will be a Bellamy the day she chooses. My father, Judson Williams, taught me one sentence in a hospital bed, and I have not broken it. I walked out of a room called Whitaker on the 12th of December, 2025. I did not slam the door. I did not need to. The paper had done the shouting, and the swing where my grandmother used to sit was, that morning, still holding my weight.